Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and I have made for the first time a cold damage over time based character, and in this case it is an occultist, simply because, well, the ascendancy just makes so much sense for it. Now this is the first time I'm touching cold damage over time, and it was pretty heavily revamped last big patch, so I've skipped an entire league without touching it since the Vortex and Cold Snap thing was pretty well worked through and everyone knew it was rather good. So this time I wanted to focus more on Arctic Breath, which did get a bit more of a revamp as well. And you can see that crawling bullshit ground is on the ground is, well, Arctic Breath. It was revamped to have this sort of like spreading ice mechanic, but I think something went wrong this patch or this league, and currently it just slowly crawls as this ice patch towards enemies and looks kind of stupid, and overall doesn't really do that much as far as the crawling mechanic is concerned. You are just throwing out basically ranged vortexes kind of that do pretty heavy cold damage over time damage. So the damage is insane. The mechanic itself is just kind of a bit stupid, and then you have a big cold snap every now and again to help supplement your cold damage over time. And the playstyle in the end becomes very similar to what the chaos skills feel like. Pretty good damage over time, strong defenses, but I think it's even a little bit better. And the reason for saying that is that the damage feels like there's just a little bit more of it, but on top of that there's a really strong defensive bonus of having chilled everything you attack or come near with the new Occultist cold sort of freeze ascendancy perks. So it feels a lot more defensive. I can get quite a lot of energy shield on this build. As you see, this is a low life Chevron's build, and yet I still managed to get 11,000 energy shield without pushing the limits too far, just, you know, decent dense fossil crafted gear, which I will of course go over shortly. But it does kind of highlight the huge disparity between life and energy shield builds at the moment, because I really did not go that all out trying to get energy shield, and yet I have a build here that is extremely strong offensively while being probably the best effective health and defensive build I have built maybe ever. And yeah, it just really was not that much work. Got to well over 11,000 energy shield in the end without pushing the limits, and to get probably about 7,000 life on a similar sort of character would be quite a feat, and yet it's nowhere near as good. And that is, of course, without the use of a Combs chest anyway. So that is just a bit of a side rant about energy shield versus life, because I haven't done too many energy shield based characters, but this feels kind of like cheating in the current game. But I really did want to experience the full-blown cold damage over time, especially against some of the end Nexus bosses, which, well, you kind of have to build this type of character for if you want to survive against those stupid Nexus modded bosses. And this one has done just that. It's been a very solid boss killer, and it's probably the character I'm going to keep alive, fully geared to try and clear my bosses from here on out, because the playstyle is just simply delicious. It's done several Deathless Uber Elder runs, and that's on a 5 link to begin with. The damage there just synergizes so well with all the cold damage over time. You drop a Arctic Breath as well as a Cold Snap. That is the primary source of your damage, but as well as that you have a Vile Cold Snap, which is another damage over time that stacks against these enemies. And you have 3 sources of really big damage over time, all being buffed by your curses and your elemental equilibrium. And all in all, it becomes pretty safe as well, because you can stand as far back as you want and just have a nice ranged playstyle, or you can kind of face tank, be lazy about it, and get a little bit more damage too. But then again, the huge amount of chill as well really does benefit just how defensive a character like this can be, and overall it's not really anything too expensive, at least not on the offensive front. To get the same sort of damage as me, you pretty much have to do nothing. To get the same sort of defenses, that's when you can start investing a bit more currency into dense fossils and making sure you roll rather nicely dense fossiled items. But damage-wise, there's only so much you can do for these cold damage over times, besides just the passive tree and the ascendancies. because it's all pretty much already there. So it's got some pretty ridiculous scaling by the time you get your gem levels and all that, and it does end up feeling like a very strong character indeed. Not the funnest playstyle, at least not for me, but it's still very much fun and a very strong character that I want to go over right now. So here is our frosty little witch, the Occultist, called Snowly Creepin', level 93 at this point. It's been pretty quick to get to this stage because I really haven't died almost ever on this character. It's pretty damn tough to die. You get kind of lazy here or there and then just die to really overpowered shit. But otherwise, it's pretty damn hard to actually get killed once you are established in this way and have your, of course, pretty strong Occultist nodes. So there's that, and you also get that, and that's just huge amounts of extra cold damage to this type of playstyle and build. And as I mentioned, the playstyle is basically throwing out Arctic breaths wherever you go, occasionally dropping a cold snap as well, because they are different types of cold damage over time, but together they form a lot more. Now, if you are wondering whether or not Arctic breath separate projectiles deal separate cold damage over time, only one instance of Arctic breath puddle will be dealing cold damage over time. So you can have 10 of these puddles up at a time, but you only get damage over time from one of them. And I'm currently using lesser multiple projectiles instead of greater multiple because you want to shoot out 3 of these at a time, because as I mentioned, you can only have 10 puddles down at any one time, as it says there. So if you use GMP, you'll throw out 1 and then 2, and then your third cast will delete your initial cast. So you get less of a spread for your puddles if you use GMP compared to LMP, which means you can shoot once, twice, and 3 times, and that's 9 puddles, meaning you will have spread in 3 different locations that way. So entirely up to you, but I think lesser multiple projectiles works better here. So Arctic Breath itself, like I said, it looks kind of janky the way it's crawling towards stuff, and I'll give you an example. So the actual creeping mechanic, as far as I'm concerned, is basically worthless. You're just throwing these out wherever you want either way, but it looks something like this. Really slowly, just tries to go towards shit, and it's also got pretty average AI. So it goes to whatever the hell it wants to a lot of the time. Now that is with the helm enchant that makes it have 38% increased movement speed as well. So it's already faster than it otherwise would be, and it's still basically a piece of shit. But the skill itself is okay. It does pretty good damage, and the playstyle seems to fit rather nicely. Ooh, piece of candy. So there's that going for us, but you then drop a cold snap, it slowly expands and fills a pretty large area, thus dealing quite a lot of damage too. If you want to, you can just strictly use cold snap in this build. You can make it a vortex and cold snap build, and a lot of the time when there's a lot of big thick enemies in several rooms, several packs, popping Vile Cold Snap will just carry you all the way through that entire map or those few rooms, especially in the double beyond examples that I've had in the video. Because Vile Cold Snap acts something like a righteous fire. It's around you and it does a huge amount of extra damage. So if you have all 3 of these up, Vile Cold Snap, and Arctic Breath, your 3 separate sources, you're dealing huge amounts of damage. Then you just have to make sure you're using either Stormbrand or Orbistorms as a elemental equilibrium activator on your targets, and then they take so much more damage. So you have to be careful not to attach any sort of cold damage to your entire character, so no jewels that have added cold damage, because that will apply to your Stormbrand or Orbistorms and ruin your elemental equilibrium. So it's a pretty straightforward character, I think. Besides that, you're just trying to scale your percent cold damage, your spell damage, because that applies to the dot, and cold damage over time. So specifically nodes like these over here, cold damage over time multiplier. There's quite a few of those on the tree, and the tree ends up being fairly flexible. You can grab some spell shield nodes like I have here, some additional influence nodes, these spell nodes too, but for the most part you're just going around traveling, picking up some energy shield and the big utility stuff like EE, like your alchemist nodes, like another curse. it's a very flexible tree. The only real requirements are elemental overload, elemental equilibrium, and then the cold damage over time nodes if you can find them on the tree nice and comfortably. So as well as that, we also have pain attunement because we are low life, but I don't think you have to do low life for this build. It's just a nice use of a shavs at the moment, I think, and lets you reserve a lot of your things. So on my life bar here, I have reserved discipline and a high level clarity, so that's all sitting here. Blood magic attached to discipline and clarity, and if you have this node over here as well, you can then reserve roughly this much of your life with clarity as well. And then on my mana, I have currently hatred and malevolence. Both add huge amounts of extra damage to the damage over time, because hatred these days straight up says more cold damage, so it seems pretty worth it. And in that same context, I have a damage over time Watcher's Eye that has 19% cold dot from malevolence. Pretty worth getting for this type of build, and you can go even bigger if you really want. For example, this here Watcher's Eye, bunch of extra mana from clarity while using clarity, bunch of extra energy shield from mana while using clarity. Nailed it. So yeah, there's this thing, but it's pretty overkill. I'm not going to bother using it because it might look like it's required. So for most of the video, you watch me use a 5 link as well. I put a 6 link in for the last level or two, but by no means necessary. The 5 link carries hard, and if you're just using a currently 5 link as well, then I recommend running something like this. You have less multiple projectiles, efficacy, controlled destruction, increased area, and then your last swap is probably hypothermia. When you go single target, you put in swift affliction and LE focus over the area node or area gem, and that's a pure single target setup there. Of course, your Arctic Breath won't be chilling anymore, but that doesn't matter because your Cold Snap is dealing a huge amount of extra chill with the Bone Chill support, hypothermia, and efficacy all linked up in a 4 link, giving quite a large amount of extra damage. So as you can see with the path of building, currently my single target Arctic Breath is 1.5 million DPS, and the Cold Snap itself is 378,000, so it's pretty hefty, not too bad at all. Add in a Vile Cold Snap and you have that there. So we're dealing over 2 million cold damage per second, pretty much always against Shaper-esque targets. Just got to make sure that your elemental equilibrium is up and also elemental overload. Other things to mention are Malevolence, Enlighten, and Hatred go over here. Level 3 Enlighten, so that you can have a bit of extra mana unreserved. And I also, like I said, took this node here, but as well as that, took a bit of extra mana because mana will be kind of difficult to manage, especially if you get to a 6 link, while you have this small amount of mana remaining. Other than that, there's really not much else to say. Try and put Frost Bombs down as often as you can. My Stormbrand has Curse on Hit, Arcane Surge, and LE Weakness. You pretty much want to be Stormbranding or Orb of Storming everything whenever you attack it, especially the tougher enemies. And crafting gear is pretty simple, like you just throw dense fossils at things. And overall, I think I used about 30 dense fossils. Got somewhat lucky here or there, got not the luckiest in some places. These gloves really aren't anything special, but they're good enough. This was pretty lucky because I used a dense, a prismatic, and a frigid and got that. But I don't think it's all that amazing because that additional energy shield body armor mod really isn't that good with a Chavirons, but it's not bad. These boots I crafted on a previous character. This took just a couple of dense fossils, but you buy a fractured base with additional spell damage if you can. And then this took something like 15 dense fossils, I think. And it's a pretty nice helm, but nothing too unrealistic, I don't think. And then ultimately try and craft some percent energy shield on your amulet. You can get cold damage over time multiplier on your amulet, but a spell roll with a cold damage roll is also pretty damn good, and actually very competitive with that mod too. Otherwise, you can do faster start of energy shield recharge on your rings. I put 1 there and 1 mana regen there. And then flasks are of course a Witchfire for your second curse. Everything else is pretty damn flexible, but I like having a quartz, a silver, and a granite. And wand, I just got some cold damage over time with cast speed, bought that by itself, and then had a spare prefix, put some cold damage there. But I think it's pretty flexible what you can do with wands, staves, shields, whatever for this type of build. And the passive tree builds itself, I don't know, just pick up cold damage over time stuff as soon as you can. And then energy shield, once you want to start becoming pure energy shield, it's pretty much viable after you get Vile Bastion, because that fills out a lot of your energy shield. So I'll leave you guys with the path of building to mess around with if you want a little bit later, but I do want to show you guys the Uber Elder kill that I did. My first one on a 5-link, deathless, pretty easy, and probably one of the better Uber Elder and endgame farmers out there at the moment. A big, strong, tanky occultist with damage over time, weather, cold, or chaos. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the build, and see you next time. Frames just, you know, dying casually. Like, I feel like old F4. It's so fucking bad. If I restart my game, it'll get a lot better. I don't know why that's how it works, but it does. So am I freezing these guys occasionally? I haven't been paying any attention. I don't think I do. M80, you're supposed to do the fucking ad phase now. God, being able to kill those dudes so easily is ridiculous. Like, you're off-screen him, you know? Just shoot out one little Arctic breath and he would degen so hard and so fast. That's gotta be one of the easiest Uber Elders I have ever done. Ever.